and buy some time. But as you're coming in, feel free to take the survey if you can access the QR code. Thank you all for coming to what's the last breakout session of ABRF 2024. After this, we're going to what sounds like a really good closing talk, so look forward to seeing you all there. Last session, so you probably heard this all before, but we'll go through it. Please make sure you silence your phones. Any of the presenters have any problems with folks taking photographs of this present? So please take photos and put them on social media, let folks know what we're doing here. Say again? Yeah, make sure you give a heads up so they're not closed eyes or gape mouthed or anything. We want to share everything. We want to make sure people know what we're doing, like I said, so please do share freely. We're going to save questions for the end, so once the panelists have their chance to give a little bit of their side of the story, we will go into a panel talk, and that's when we can bring your questions up. I'll also qualify that if you see the name on the slides, the War for Core Talent, one that came from Joe Dragavon, he suggested we have something about how challenging it is to keep and maintain staffing right now. It maybe doesn't have quite that specific flavor, but there's a lot of good content in here. But if you're in the app, they added some words to it, so I apologize if there's some words in there that don't have any pertinence to what we're doing today, but we are talking about core staffing. A lot of institutions have gone through standardization of job families for core facilities professionals, and we're going to hear from a couple about doing that. So before, I'm Andrew Bernard. I'm the newly hired Director of Research Infrastructure Support at Tufts University, where we don't have any standardization. Most recently, I was at UMass Amherst, where we went through a process of some standardization, so very much looking forward to hearing what folks have done today. We only have about 17 of the surveys completed, but just so we can see who's here with us as well. Mostly academics or not. Okay, good amount of administration. We have some folks who are managing individuals or groups and folks doing some other things too. This is probably, I'm surprised to see as much yes as I do, but whether folks are happy with their current compensation. Looks like a mixed bag of not really and you tell me who is. No defined career path for the folks in the room. That's also, again, why we're having these talks, and you'll get to see some folks who've done a lot of good work to get towards making those paths existent. How do you feel your salaries compare to others at your institution or organization? That's good. At least within your organization, a good chunk of folks have some parity. We're getting that's changing in real time. Within your industry, yep, I think there's a lot of lack of data. So there's quite a bit of information we don't have to know whether we compare or are far afield from our colleagues at other institutions. And yes, at other industries, I think everybody in academia feels we are not on par. So with that, I will say we have quite a few good speakers here to talk to us. So we're going to hear from Deanna Benson, a professor in the Department of Neuroscience and director of the Advanced Microscopy and Bioimaging Core at Mount Sinai. Nikos Tavares, an assistant professor in neuroscience and operations manager for the microscopy core at Mount Sinai. They're going to give you what's happening, where they are, what they've done to date, and how it's gone for them. Then we're going to switch over and we'll hear from Andy Chitty, the director of University Shared Resources at Oregon Health and Science University, who'll give an overview of the structure and the restructuring that they did recently. And then we'll hear from Kathryn Goforth, the Senior Administrator for Research and Innovation with the Oregon Health and Science University as well, who will give a more in-depth conversation about the history and the challenges since they've implemented their restructuring. So after that, we'll invite Shekhar Patil up as well, and we'll have the panel conversation. So again, please save your questions for them. I will ask you to welcome the presenters with me as I walk off the stage, and thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So before I start, I wanted to say a couple of things. First, I'm giving a presentation that is basically from both Nikos and I drew the short straw. And so, but if you have questions about anything, you can ask either of us. He's more the numbers guy. I'm not the numbers person. So I wanted to also give you a sense of when we started this career track project. It was when we first started. And there were several advantages that I think we had that a lot of you probably aren't in the same position. And so I wanted to kind of get that out of the way first because we were able to take advantage of a few key issues. The first was that we came in to lead the microscopy core. The microscopy core at that time in our institution was at a very low point with respect to both instrumentation and personnel. And so we were brought on board to effect change. People wanted change, the institution wanted change, and they were ready for change. And so that really put a lot of balls in our court. The second thing is microscopy was and is booming. And so there's been so much innovation in the world in microscopy, and faculty have been clamoring to have the best instruments and amazing expertise. And so we also had the faculty to back us up. And then the third thing is Nikos was my first hire. And so I brought him on board with kind of he bought into the vision that we were building something and came into what was not a great position with the idea that we would build the proper position for him. And so he was very much a part of this project, and the positions morphed as this project kind of went on. So those are my caveats. So when we came into this, it ends in 2017, but that's appropriate because that's when we kind of started this. This was the talent pool that we wanted to get more of, which were the people graduating with PhDs, and new postdocs. And it was at a time when there were many, many, many talks that we all went to that were talking about more and more PhDs being awarded, and the number of tenure track positions that were available to them were declining. You can't see it here, but there's a pink kind of triangle which represents the delta between the tenure track positions and the private sector that was picking up those positions. Core positions sat in this kind of light blue bar, and we thought we could at least capture some of this delta by trying to capture those people that really bought into kind of the academic world, that didn't really want to go to industry. And so from the personnel perspective, there was a need to attract those people with attractive positions. And so at that time in our core, we had something that was similar to, but actually even not quite as good as the traditional NIH staff core position. And so the NIH staff traditional model is kind of built on a single staff scientist doing training, service, maybe some collaboration, and that person is expert in all of those things and does the same thing over and over for years, and maybe a little better, a little faster, or maybe brings on something innovative, but that person is kind of the center of everything. Management typically was separate, and there were 3 steps up. And so the challenge was that the entry level was too low. Whether you had tons of training or no training, you came in at the same low level. Upward mobility was limited, so you topped out way too soon. And the job titles were not at all representative of the expertise. And I felt that this was a real problem because in our institution, some people would have the same job title who were new undergraduates as people who had postdocs, and which is like mind-boggling. But additionally, a new person comes into the core and they have no idea what the expertise is of the person that they're meeting, right? It's like the title doesn't tell them anything. And when the person comes in and has this title, they can't take it anywhere. So it's like they're stuck in that position because no one outside, even if inside your institution, everybody recognizes them for being an amazing expert in some field of microscopy, it's very difficult for them to move. And so to attract really great talent, you have to also give them the permission to move places and know that their position is valued elsewhere. And so from the core perspective, we came in because we were building, right? So we wanted to build these positions, but we also wanted to make the core better. And as you all know, core facilities have changed a lot over the last couple of decades. And so there was this old, oops, I did the wrong one. This one. Hello? There we go. Okay. So this is the old model. So we have core facilities kind of in the center, and it was the same kind of model of somebody doing a lot of work in maybe a microscopy, maybe a little image analysis, and sharing that with the researchers. And so there's a back and forth between research and the core facility. Maybe they'd be training people in the research lab, and that was kind of where it sat. There was maybe some interaction with institute administration. But of course, now we know that it's all evolved, and each one of these people within a core, often there's multiple people, each of which has their own expertise, and each of those people having their own expertise have to collaborate across institutions and have to form new relationships even between cores within your institution. And so each individual is having to have a greater range of skill sets. Additionally, we really bought into this notion that, for you guys, this is preaching to the choir, but it isn't an accident in the last slide that the cores are at the center. Cores, of course, see people from all kinds of departments coming in with all kinds of ideas. They're hotbeds for collaboration. I think all of us have probably set up people saying, did you know that so-and-so was doing this and you guys should really talk, right? Or we ourselves have started collaborations based on things that we see coming in. Or we solve problems and we invent new instruments, new analysis pipelines to solve problems that we see. And so we are hotbeds of innovation, and none of that was kind of reflected in the positions. And so we did a lot of research in the literature and came up. We were very impressed with work done at Northwestern. Northwestern, of course, did this huge cross-institutional endeavor to trying to change the way to organize cores under a large infrastructure, but also to, in there was recognized that core positions were unique and had unique kind of structures, and they made career families based on core scientists. And so we looked at that model for like what would be needed for a core scientist, how would you reward core capabilities as well as you would for like an assistant professorship. And so the core scientist sits here at the center. There's personnel management, there's project management, technical support and scientific support, and included and kind of discussed or assumed was training and collaboration and consultation, but these lighter blue bars weren't part of the reward structure, which we wanted to include. And additionally, there was sort of missing this idea of innovation also not being included in the promotion reward structure. And so we thought a little harder on it, looked at some more models. We also kind of made a hybrid. We combined it with Simon Watkins has run a core for a long time that's really successful at the University of Pittsburgh. It's based mostly on research scientists and collaboration. And so we thought we'd kind of pull all these ideas together and have much of what you saw on the last slide, plus actually making explicit education and training, collaboration and innovation part of the advancement and reward structure for promotion. And we made core manager or core administration an add-on position with the idea that not every scientist is a great manager and not every great manager is a fantastic scientist. So we didn't want to put manager at the peak of that kind of structure. And so this is our career matrix. And so this has all of our positions that we currently have. They're divided into these families. So this first family is core research associate, associate 2, and senior core research. This is basically the technician path. I lost this argument to make them like all real world terms. This is like Sinai's version of these positions because technician was stolen by the clinical side and we couldn't use that. So, but these are the entry-level positions and there is a clear way of advancement. Importantly though, you can go from this very beginning entry-level position all the way through to the top of a principal core scientist. So the next career path, core scientist, senior core scientist, principal scientist, these titles are taken from industry. And the idea was that they were titles and terms that people would understand from industry and would demand the kind of expertise that would be seen in those equivalents. And then we had the add-on positions, manager comes on to principal core or from senior core scientist and above, or they can be added on to, these are non-tenure track positions, assistant, associate, and full professor. And these academic appointments also became part of our career pathway. And so you can go all the way from here to here. These require having a PhD. The metrics that we use to award advancement are all highlighted up here. And in particular, it's worth noting that part of the salary structure is based on this percent efforts and grants, with the idea that the more we advertise that we have great people with great expertise, the institution and faculty recognize that, and they bring them in on their grants, and they pay part of their salary, and that enables us to give them a boost. And so this has all helped us fund the structure and fund people's real world salaries. It also, the assistant associate full professor in our institution, that is a rate limiting step to submit a grant. You cannot submit a grant unless you are an assistant. You can collaborate on grants. You can co-submit a grant. But in order to submit one on your own, if you have an idea, in our case, for like an instrument, if you want to write your own build an instrument type grant, you want to be able to do it. And we had enough people that really wanted that control over their ideas to be able to have this kind of a structure. And so we can, these slides will be shared. We can go, I mean, there's a lot of detail here. So oh, go ahead. Oh, yes, I almost forgot. And so thank you, Shekhar. I knew I would forget this. And so here. So this is not static. And the idea is that we revisit all of this all the time, and but we also can add on to it. And so just this year, we've added on technical director. So I'm a faculty director of the Corps, and so I have my own lab. A technical director would be full-time in the Corps, but is a step up from that managerial position. Okay, so the advantages we've seen a lot of benefits. It's been a short time in action, but we have seen a huge response. And so a really obvious one for this session is we have great recruits. Recruiting has been amazing, and we are retaining staff. And so we have a great team, and I guess word gets out, I don't know, but the last series when we had to hire somebody, we had a really difficult time making choices. Grant participation has increased, which helps a lot for this like salary compensation. There's protocol development, instrument development, continuity. I didn't put here, I forgot in the Corps, it's also really noteworthy that we became a center of excellence for LICA. And so they see us as a good place to go to test out instruments. For investigators, they see us now as we are the research standard for microscopy at Sinai. And so they know we are the experts. We're the resident experts. And that kind of opens up new avenues for their research. So they can come to us with an idea and no expertise and have us on their grants, and that elevates their ability to do better research. So they have new funding opportunities. We give them technical continuity. The institution, it's helped for faculty recruitment. We meet with any incoming faculty needing microscopy, we meet with them. And they see if we have what they need. We're frequently a part of why they come. We're part of faculty retention conversations, and that has benefited us in terms of instruments and even people. It's cost efficient for the institution, it's more sustainable, and we also teach courses for the graduate students. The core personnel, I think that they are happy. We just had an exit interview for someone who moved to a new job in Maryland. She moved laterally, she's remained an assistant professor, and she didn't want to go. It was a two-body problem. But I felt really good about our exit interview because she had felt like she really was able to stretch out and do whatever she wanted to do and try new things. Let's see, I had one more institutional thing. Oh, I forgot to write that we've been integral for two major institute grants. So there's the Tisch Cancer Institute grant, and there's a skin grant, the Skin Center grant. We're their core. They don't have a separate core, they use us. And that is it. So this is a picture of New York City. The big tall building is the Annenberg building. This is where the core resides, and this was across the street last week. It was really beautiful in Central Park, and so you can see all the flowers, and this is the team. And so if you have any questions, save them for the end. We are hiring one position now. So this is the job description, responsibilities, essential, but if you are interested or know anybody, there's a QR code. And this is where we got our data. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. My name's Andy Chitty. I'm here with my colleague, Kathryn Goforth, who has helped me through a lot of this process in the aftermath of developing our core scientist career track at Oregon Health and Science University. That is actually, you see, is actually a picture of a gondola that takes us up to our Hill campus, which is really kind of fun to go up there. So if you ever make it out to Portland, be happy to show you around. One caveat, I know that a lot of people have probably seen these slides before. I've given this presentation a couple times. So I apologize for the redundancy in that. That's the bad news. The good news is I shortened my presentation significantly to give Kathryn time to talk about some things, so you won't have to suffer through that too long. I don't think I have to explain too much about the differences between core research staff positions versus core staff positions, but in general, personnel in the core staffing, and I'm talking about core staffing now, not necessarily the leadership track. In general, the core staffing, general research core staffs are personnel that are oftentimes en route to another career, perhaps as a PI, doing their own publications or writing grants or things like that. And so therefore their career trajectory is a little bit different and is more of a temporary situation. And they may end up taking a lower salary due to that. Core staff positions, in contrast, are careers that people pursue in service to those folks in the general research, whether it's the PIs or their staff, all the researchers on campus. They are helping those researchers further their own projects and careers, and the core scientist has expertise built around the specific technologies. And then, because we're all at the crossroads of science and business in the cores, we have those business activities that we're used to doing that are a little bit different in terms of customer service, business operations, and the collaborations that go along with that. So at OHSU, we had a massive retention problem in the cores. I think we can all sort of feel similar pain across the room about that. I think a lot of people have felt that. But therein lies an opportunity. Never waste a good crisis. The OHSU general research population was arguably or significantly different from the core scientists. And of course, core scientists are so well trained in their scientific disciplines that oftentimes they're pulled away by industry partners who really value their expertise and their skill sets. And skill sets will become really important in this discussion later. So we determined that we would take advantage of this crisis and have our leadership recognize that we need to develop a new career job group to address some of the retention issues that we were having, but also to develop a distinct and professionalized and long-term career trajectory for our core community on campus. And one thing that we did is we made sure that we patterned it as much as we could along the lines of what was already in place at OHSU. The general research population has these 5 different levels, and I encourage, if you're going to go through this process, take a look at what your HR already has in process and kind of pattern or parallel alongside that, because that will help you garner the support of HR if they're looking at something that they're familiar with. So as you can see, the Research Assistant 1 through Senior Research Associate, we have the Core Scientist at OHSU, Assistant Core Scientist through Senior Core Scientist. So we had to develop some sort of minimum qualifications for our core scientist roles, and I'm going to show you the first 2, Assistant Core Scientist 1 and 2 here. You see the more traditional approaches: bachelor's degree, associate degree in relevant field, and 1 year of relevant experience, etc. HR is really used to seeing that, but we wanted to focus more on skill sets, and so in our approach, we looked at developing a set of skills for each core and general skills for all cores, and we called that our core descriptor matrix, and I'll go through that a little bit more. But the idea is that you're not necessarily looking for people with a specific degree and years of experience, because sometimes that doesn't necessarily translate to core operations. What you're looking for is people who have the skills to get the job done. That's what the PI really cares about. We wanted to have associate level education be applicable to every level of our core scientist series, But at associate core scientist, we really felt like we had to put in a bachelor's level as a minimum. The reason for that is because we do some hiring off of H-1B visa, and the H-1B visa guidelines and rules are that you have to, not only does the candidate have to have a bachelor's, but we have to require it as part of the process. So otherwise, you would have seen associate plus number of years of experience in that as well, but we weren't able to do that. So. But you can see the equivalent in combination of skills, education, experience is also reflected there. So if we look at Assistant Core Scientist 2, kind of diving into this, we have a general scope that applies to all of our cores all across campus. And that's just under general supervision, performs various standardized and routine or expert services, may perform some assignments independently, and you can read through that, and then we have the minimum qualification, and that applies across all the cores. But we all know that although cores are the same in that they provide services to everyone, and a lot of the operations are similar among cores, we also know that core technologies differ from core to core. And that's where we had to delve in a little bit further and deviate a little bit from the standard HR model. So what we asked the core directors to do is to go core by core and develop their own core descriptor matrix, which listed the skill sets that were specifically important to their individual core. So here we have flow cytometry. I'm not going to read all of that, but it's a bulleted list of a few of the core cytometries, the flow cytometry's cores, skill sets that are critical for this person to be assistant core scientist 2 in that core. Needs to understand basic principles of flow cytometry and et cetera, as you go down that. And that's specific to that flow core. Electron microscopy, of course, has skill sets associated with them. Skilled in operating TEM and SEM, of course, and various other skill sets that are important for that level of a core scientist in that core, and histopathology, of course. So you have the general core descriptor matrix, and then each individual core has its own individual skill sets associated with it. So that becomes really important in this next section here. We all know that cores are similar in their operations, but they differ by technology. And because of the things that drive the market, I think you were mentioning, microscopy, right? Things that drive the market, whether or not there's a lot of experts in the field or whether or not they're in high demand. Our big crisis in staffing came from flow cytometry when all of our flow cytometrists were being hired away at about 50% higher salaries. We know that these different technologies may require different salary ranges associated with them. So this is just, the numbers in there are just general numbers, but we developed 5 different salary groups, of which we're utilizing right now the middle 3. We kind of have the A and E as shoulder groups. But you can see that the salary ranges start out by and large the same, but they may increase depending on the technology that you're in. So something like radiochemistry research, which requires certain licenses and so on, may require significantly higher salary levels associated with them. And we all know that we're under pressure to keep our costs down, so it has to be evaluated in light of all that. So we placed our salary ranges for cores in the various different groups. And the results of all of this effort is that we started out, we had retention, where we were losing key personnel, which was critical for us at the time. And again, if you're in a crisis situation, look at that and see how you can leverage that to make that work for you. We had distinct core careers that offered long-term opportunity with core salaries. I really like if someone wants to move on in their career to work in industry or something along those lines. I applaud them for doing that. I just didn't like the fact that a lot of our people who wanted to stay and work in cores left because they felt like they couldn't afford not to move on. One of the most gratifying things for me is the sense of belonging among the core colleagues that it instilled. You know, they felt like they had a more appropriate set of parameters and a community, as opposed to being sort of misappropriated into the general research group. So I felt really great about that. And I think that that once they have that and they interact a little bit more, it certainly helps out with morale in many ways. And then because our salary groups are sectioned off, we are able to make changes as the market evolves. So we can move cores around if necessary. I went through that really quickly, but if you're interested in reading more about it, we did publish a couple years ago in JBT, December 22, Career Path for Shared Resources Personnel. It has a case study of OHSU's project, and feel free to reach out to us anytime to get more information. I did want to mention one other thing because it's important to this discussion. Is just yesterday an email came out from University of Arizona, which I've had the real pleasure of being able to work with on their core career pathways. Barbara over here, Barbara Franzway from there, was instrumental in leading that effort and developing their own core career pathway. The email, I asked Ryan if I could quote it. Ryan is the director of shared resources there as well. He said, "It is with great pride and excitement that I'm able to announce the newly minted core scientist and core manager family descriptions within the University of Arizona HR system. It's the culmination of the incredible amount of work over the last year by a truly collaborative working group within cores, HR, and central HR. Means that core from anywhere in the university are now able to use the core scientist and core scientist manager position descriptions to both remap current core employees and use for future hires and postings." Just really makes me feel good to see that we can do this at other institutions, and I think that we should all continue to talk about what we can do together to pattern our work to develop career programs so that we have similar approaches, and I think that will help everyone. Now, all that said, a lot of people that come up here and talk about all the successes they've had, I think it's important to talk about the challenges, and our situation is not without challenges. And so, we're going to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit here, and I'm going to have Kathryn come up and talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been dealing with since. Barbara, you got to keep an eye on this because it all happened after we introduced our core scientist plan, and so you're in that position where you can learn from our mistakes. So.
All right, thank you, Andy. So that's great. He talks about the fun stuff, and then he says, and now it went wrong, and here's Kathryn. Okay, all right. So my name is Kathryn Goforth, and I work with Andy in our shared resources in my role as Senior Administrator for Research and Innovation at OHSU, and kind of the informal working title that I have for the part of my job that works with Andy is HR Manager for the shared resources, the university shared resources. And so if you are familiar with the cartoon Family Circus, you'll know the character Billy and his adventures and his movements around the neighborhood being tracked with this black dotted line that you see here. And so when Andy asked me if I would present on HR management for the cores for this conference, my first question was, can I start with Billy from Family Circus? Because I think that for all of us, so those of us in the core community and our colleagues in HR for university leadership, it can feel a little all over the place at times, especially because from my understanding here, a lot of this work that's been done over the last few years, it's really new. It's still kind of in a brand new stage, and especially for university leadership and HR, we're still in kind of that growth curve and getting everybody on the same page. And so for us, the OHSU Core Scientist Series was implemented in early 2022, and I started working with Andy in the summer of 2022. So it was clear after the initial launch that there was going to be a need for strategic planning to keep it moving forward. So I liken it to kind of trying to walk through a bowl of Jell-O. There's some structure there, but it's pretty wobbly and it's not really set. So, and as I mentioned, I'm brand new to ABRF, and I've learned a great deal this week about how different cores are structured. So at OHSU, some of our cores are centralized, and then some of them live in individual departments. And my hope with this presentation today is that even for those of you who are completely decentralized in your core management, that you can take away some ways and some tools in which some basic centralized administration tracking can help with your core's management. Okay, so my background is as a department administrator, and that's what I always go back to. And in the case of the OHSU shared resources, some of them, as I mentioned, are in the individual departments, and some live collectively under our university shared resources umbrella, of which Andy has oversight. But things were all over the place, and it proved tricky to make the case to HR about why the core scientist series needed to be examined differently than the positions doing what we would consider kind of more traditional research. And so one of our first steps was to create a database that listed all of the core scientists employees across the university, whether they're in a department or whether they fall under Andy's umbrella. And so by having all of our core scientists listed in one place, we can provide quickly high-level summaries of total numbers of core scientists, how many we have at each level, the numbers of core scientists in various labs, how many are embedded in a department versus being in the university shared resources group, the names of the staff that provide their HR and financial administration, because especially for those in the department, I'm not doing their HR work, someone else is, but we often need to coordinate. And we had no idea in a lot of cases, you know, we would have 18 labs spread out all over the place. We had no idea who was doing their HR work for them. And so for this database, I use Smartsheet, if you are familiar with that software, but Excel works too. And so if anyone is interested in what that looks like, I'm happy to share a template of what we've got going. And then simultaneously for our core directors and our colleagues in HR and university leadership, we created an internal website that lists all of our cores, their salary band assignments, the class specification details, and position description templates. And I feel like here it's important to point out that transparency is really important. Directors can see the salary bands assigned to each core, but not individual employee salaries. That remains confidential, right? And they can review the class specifications not only for their own core, but for others to see how specific or general others are being. So as Andy showed you, you know, flow cytometry had this really long list, and histopathology not so much, and that's what works for those cores, and it's great. But I think it's really good that when we are going through a process, when we're reviewing everything, other core directors, they can see what each other's doing, and that informs their work, and I think it makes it better. And so also via this website, university leadership and HR gain an appreciation of the complicated nature of core staffing. And then finally, we worked on a more targeted plan of establishing relationships with our HR colleagues. So for example, HR assigned a specific compensation analyst to the core scientist group because our request requires someone who understands how unique these positions are. And we also created a work group recently, just in January, and it's composed of me, Andy, 2 research HR business partners, and the director of compensation at OHSU. We currently meet weekly, and this is helping us get over the finish line on some of these outstanding details for the job series. Right now we're working on updating the class specifications and the salary band assignments, and it's something that we hope that will continue to be on HR's radar as a regular process in the future. All right, so this shows you, this is screenshots from that internal website that we have, so you can see what kinds of information is displayed there. And if there's any changes, like back in the fall, HR wanted each of our cores to have specific position templates, job description templates that were specific to each individual core. Before, we just had one that was, here's assistant core scientist, here's an associate core scientist. But then what HR wanted to do was make an assistant core scientist that is specific to flow. And now we have an assistant core scientist that is specific to histopathology. So each of them has they have 5 for each of the cores. And so those position templates, description templates are uploaded onto this website. So that way when we have changes, that website is, I manage it, and it's in real time. So our core directors always have access to the latest information. All right, so launching the series was one thing, and then maintaining it and keeping it going is another. And so with all administrative initiatives, there's going to be a few speed bumps. So in the first one, the OHSU HR team experienced a severe staffing shortage starting in fall 22. And I've been in university administration. This is my third university now for almost 20 years. I've never seen a staffing shortage like that within a unit in my entire career. It was just a combination. All the planets aligned in HR was having some problems. So they are just now starting, thankfully, to stabilize and regroup, and we're really happy for that for our HR colleagues because it was really tough on them. And with our work group, we are starting to make progress on that list of outstanding items that we had that were related to the series. But while this particular HR staffing crisis may have been very OHSU specific, it did highlight challenges Andy and I face in educating our HR colleagues about core scientists. So we start to work with them on the series. We find ourselves maybe 3 months later, we're making some headway, and then poof, we've got a new team we've got to work with. And we have to start back over at square one. And that caused us to lose quite a bit of time when we're trying to get this core series going. And then secondly, OHSU conducted a full compensation review for research employees in early 2023. And that process, it was very well-intentioned and actually beneficial to our research employees, but it muddied the waters for core scientists in some cases. The compensation review also assigned new salary bands to our core scientist series, and we didn't have input on that. It led to some compression issues at the upper end of some of our salary bands. And so that's something that we're addressing through the work group that I've mentioned, and we feel hopeful now we've got a direct line of communication to the Director of Compensation to work through those. And so that salary band challenge is going to feed into another point that I'll make here shortly. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Let's see. To the side? What? Ah, there we go. It just needed Andy to stand up and like.
Oh, we got it?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. All right, so moving forward, though, I think we have a light at the end of the tunnel. I hope so. So Andy and I know that our efforts are crucial in providing continuing education on the unique nature of the Core Scientist series. And this won't be a one-and-done process for us. At the beginning, I kind of thought, well, we're just going to educate them. They're going to read Andy's paper. We're going to show them some slides, and then poof, that's it. We're good to go forever. But I've learned now, 2 years into this, no, it will be a continual process over and over again. Even for our HR colleagues that are working with us on a regular basis, we are one unit of 1 million that they are trying to manage. So it's really helpful for us that we've got some standard materials in our pocket that we're able to show to HR. And so as we implement core scientist positions, having some standardized education materials like the article that Andy referenced, perhaps a database of who among us at ABRF has these positions, where are they, how many do you have, what levels do you have, what do you call them, that would prove beneficial not only to those of us who have core scientists already, but those who are looking to create something like that at their home institution. And then secondly, salary tables. And so as I've mentioned, I'm super new to ABRF and understand there was a salary survey done in 2022. And I think I see Ken here. He helped me. There he is. He helped me yesterday get access to that so that I could review it. And I think that represents a very important first step in what I think could be a helpful next goal. So if I put on my former department administrator hat for a minute, at OHSU for clinical and basic science faculty, we use the Association of American Medical Colleges, the AAMC faculty and clinician tables to inform salary rates. And of course, that is a much more robust, it's a very established sample pool to pull from compared to core scientists. And so while I'm not suggesting that it should look exactly like that, I think that's a helpful framework to look at as we move towards something like that. And thankfully, ABRF did its own survey in 2022, and it has some great salary tables. When I was reviewing it, I noted that there's some areas like imaging and genomics that the salary data is very robust. But for other areas like proteomics and flow cytometry, increasing the number of respondents would help give us a fuller picture. And so as we've heard in many sessions over the last 3 days, Staffing for core science labs is complicated. The salary depends on the type of core lab, the area of the country, whether the lab is associated with a public or private university or industry. And these are all factors that could make compiling salary tables a big reach. But I believe, and based on conversations I've had with others this week, there's a lot of other people who think this too, that the ABRF is well positioned to be the leader to continue taking steps in furthering the work on salary tables and refining them to serve our community's needs. So, yeah, there we go. So I would like to thank you all for your time and interest in this topic. I would like to thank Andy for giving me the opportunity to present to you today. For, a couple of years ago, he said he needed some help with a few HR transactions. I thought it was going to be me, like, okay, sure, Andy, boop, boop, I'm going to push some buttons and off we go. But now I'm in the Hotel California of core administration, and that's it. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, panelists. We finished with plenty of time, so if you have questions, please come up to the microphones.
Hello, thank you. My name is Phil Hochberger. I've been involved in this for a while now. So I'm going to raise the elephant in the room. The graduate students, the postdocs, the residents have all unionized. What that meant is huge changes in the structure of the university and how we're going to handle it. I'm going to ask each of the panelists, but you represent teams, so one of each of you to respond to this question. Is it time to organize unions for core facility staff?
Why don't you start?
Is it on? Can you hear me? No, it's not on. Is it on?
It's on.
Yeah. Okay. So what I will say is, and I'm going to, here's what I will say. I think at OHSU we've had the same. Graduate students and postdocs have also unionized, and there is an effort, and that has certainly changed the employment landscape at the university for sure. There is a movement right now to unionize research employees, and for us, our core scientists are classified as research employees. And so core scientists would be included in that. And so while on the one hand, Andy and I have had discussions about concerns, especially for salaries for core scientists, right? Because a lot of times, what we've seen with the graduate students and postdocs is it's easier to tie them together and say, okay, if you're a graduate student year 1, here's what everybody in the union's going to make. Postdoc year 5, here's what because this is what the union says, and here's your schedule for any salary increases and things. And so if core scientists are included with research employees, and if they unionize at OHSU, which is not certain yet, they're in the process of gathering signatures right now. But I think that we had some initial pauses where we said, all right, what would this mean for core scientist salaries? Because as Andy said, we like to be flexible and respond to market rates. For us, I feel like what would work in our advantage is we have those different groups that each of our cores is assigned to. So we do have some internal flexibility there. And on the HR side of things, on the back end of things, we have Assistant Core Scientist 1, Group B, and Assistant Core Scientist 1, Group D. Those are actually 2 separate positions as far as HR is concerned. And so they are paid at different rates. So I feel a little more at ease that we've got some of that built-in flexibility. I mean, we'll just kind of have to see how it plays out. It's a really good question, and one we're tackling right now, actually.
Yeah, we are quite concerned about where that's going, but we'll just, like Kathryn said, we're going to tackle that. We're going to cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah, so we were just saying, gosh, we hadn't really thought about that. Postdocs have unionized at our institution. That's as far as it's gone right now. Of course, this is obviously a trend across the United States. And so I kind of worry that the nuances that are assigned to the positions that we have would be lost in giving all research, that it would come back to defining everybody as the same entry-level research technician. So I think that we would have to work hard to make sure that our positions were codified in a way that was recognized at the very beginning. We haven't had to deal with it yet, but we're going to have to put some thought into that to make sure that we have things set up in advance before something like that might happen. Yeah.
Though not a panelist, I'll add that the institution I just came from, when they centralized cores intentionally, it's a unionized organization, research staff, faculty, admins, and classified staff are all unionized in different classes. And it was told to me that when they hired the core directors, they intentionally hired them in a non-unit position. Because of the flexibility of core finances, you want to be able to maybe not worry about the union when things go bad. It took a long time. We got those folks unionized. They are in there now, but some of the challenges we had is when we moved them from a non-unit position to unionized position, that we couldn't get it across what this actually meant, that it was different from all the other classifications that were in that union. My own opinions about how it settled is irrelevant, but I'll just say that exactly that, as they do move over, making sure all the good work that's been done to classify and keep them in those broad classifications that are unique to core facilities is going to be really critical. Sorry.
So so University of Pittsburgh is about to union, like they've got their signatures, they're just waiting to schedule the vote, but it's like all staff. So it sounds like you think that would make it harder to make core, like to actually get core staff recognized as being something distinctly different than research staff?
In my own personal opinion, and working with HR administration, what I think might help us the most is that we've got those different groups that they are assigned to salary-wise, if I'm answering your question correctly. Yeah.
But we don't. So.
I know, and when we first started, hearing rumblings about the union and kind of, reading the signs a little bit, grad students did it, postdocs are in their first contract negotiation right now. I mean, that may be where it's headed. And Andy and I were quite concerned at the beginning, not because we wanted to stop or had any concerns about a unionization effort. I think there's been some really great positives for our grad students and potentially for our postdocs as a result of that. But we were concerned about, like, oh gosh, we've spent all this time, 2 years, trying to get HR to understand that core scientists, we have to respond to industry trends in a way research assistants don't. And so, but then when we kind of took a step back and thought, okay, it is what it is, it's going to happen. So if it's going to happen, we'll have to cross that bridge later, like Andy said. But we've got those groups. And it's, as far as HR is concerned, they have different job codes. So, within those groups, and they're assigned to completely different salary bands. So I think that'll work in our favor.
I think I have an easier question for you.
That was a hard question. Phil, I don't know if we answered it, but I think just, if you don't mind, I would just say it's a really complex answer to that question, because on the one hand, we want the flexibility to be able to meet the needs of the core scientist, but we also know that there's reasons why people want to have a union affiliation.
So my question is, at what point in the process would you recommend bringing an HR rep into the conversation? So if our cores are starting to talk about developing these suggested pathways, should we kind of come to our HR with a template that has some information that we're willing to work through together, or should we bring them in earlier in the conversation to help us develop these pathways so that they're more in line with what the university would approve?
I can tackle this, and because I developed the initial part of the Sinai positions, and back then we didn't have much material to work on, so we were basically building it from scratch. So we brought HR with a full proposal, like we had the positions, we had the current positions and how they would change, and that's when we brought in HR. But I think right now you have enough resources available to you to bring HR from way earlier into the conversation. You have to make the case, of course, of why these positions are different and necessary, But then with all of us here at ABRF, and there's publications out there, and we are happy to keep in contact and but I would bring the HR way sooner into the conversation.
Could I ask, Barbara, put you on the spot and just have you give your experience? Because I think you did a really great job of bringing them in early on, and I think it was a really positive experience.
Yeah, sure. I'll use the microphone so everyone can hear. We knew that there was a method by which new job families and job categories were able to be created. So we're able to point to that on the central HR website and say, hey, we want to take advantage of this opportunity. Here are the reasons why. And we use the materials like the publication that Andy had pointed out, and also the materials that Phil had from Northwestern to really get generic and general buy-in. And once HR was on board with that early on, then we worked together as a group, actually doing all of the work really without HR being there. And there was a lot of development work, and you all alluded to that, writing it in the language that HR is expecting and understands that matches the structure that's already there. Then once that was really almost finalized, we brought our HR team back, got another sort of round of buy-in and approval, if you will. They were impressed, and then it had to go up from our HR group that we work immediately with to the central HR and compensation team. So there was several rounds of it, and they were included at several time points. But really, the first check-in was just sort of a, if you want to do this, here's a green light, go do the work. And then we did the work and brought it back to them for the additional rounds. So I think that worked well for our institution.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. The first one being, when you were moving along your process to identify all of these different aspects, to what degree did you go with working with the staff on having input from them? So was it just to core directors, or did you go down further to the actual bench scientists in that regard? And then also, I wanted to know, when you finished and you had all of these established, what was the response? Did many people end up getting a higher salary, or were they satisfied with the roles as they had been created?
Yeah, so when we were developing it, we had our plan and we brought it to the other core directors. All of us shared it with our staffs, just because we're all small enough groups. We wanted to make sure that we had buy-in from everyone. And that was really important. So what went forward with HR had input from everybody. And all kinds of people caught out things, as you might imagine, right? And they bought into it, and also then there was a space of time. And actually, you can talk about the space of time, because Shekhar was working very hard to actually get the thing implemented. So all the implementation was going. Do you want to talk about? And then address the buy-in, because I can tell them about, in our core, people have bought in, but you'll be able to tell how other cores have bought in.
So the other core staff, they were excited to have just the core word in the title. So core scientist meant a lot than just a research scientist. It told the people reading their resumes that they have expertise and experience working in a core, as opposed to just being a research scientist. And then as it was time to give them promotion, we moved them from just the research track positions to the core research track positions. And it's been working well for 3 years now.
I want to add like a little anecdote, because when we first started this process, Diana mentioned, I joined the core in the old structure and was basically developing these positions with myself as well in mind. So I looked well within about what would make a fruitful career, looked at my peers that might go into similar careers, and like asked everybody around about like what would be a good position, right, that would make you stay. And we were having the churn problem. And also to answer your question about salary, like we now can offer salaries that are very competitive, and they really match somebody's expertise and knowledge, which we couldn't do in the past.
So we had a group of 3 core directors, and those folks are also co-authors on the paper that I mentioned, who took the lead in sort of championing this on behalf of all the cores. I think one of the things we were concerned about with trying to gather a huge amount of input from the core, the folks that work in the core, is that, if it didn't work out, what would be the ramifications of that? Because we were concerned about the challenges that we faced. That said, we did gather input and had a lot of market input based on some of the experiences that people were having in the core. And we did see a lot of significant salary increases. I had to go through all of the 18 cores that we have in our portfolio and make sure I understood the financial impact of that. And as it turned out, even though some got significant salary increases and others got more modest salary increases, we ended up increasing our total core operating budget among 18 cores by about 5%, and the VPR signed on to that given the circumstances that we were facing, and with the to support that with the idea that we would do what we could down the road to help mitigate that with rate adjustments as necessary. But it wasn't as big of a financial impact across all cores as we thought. So that's important too to remember. You have all these stakeholders. You have HR, but you also have folks who are looking at the finances. You have senior leadership, and getting everybody involved and on board early on in this process is really going to be helpful.
Andrew, if you don't mind, I'd just like to ask a slightly different question. All of this has been terrific. Turning to the area of recruitment, have you faced any unique challenges in sourcing candidates for roles in cores? And have you had any unique successes reaching into different communities and having different tactics that have been successful?
Yeah, I mean, so I think each core has its own kind of contact base. And so we advertise in like the Sinai way, which is like the Sinai way as a website. Nobody sees that. And so for the microscopy core, there's the confocal listserv. And so we advertise through the confocal listserv, which everyone who runs a microscopy core is on that list. And that has been the most effective way for us to recruit candidates, I think, hands down.
I think it's worth mentioning that the reason why we are all having so many problems, like even defining these positions, like this reflects into job searches. You try to go on LinkedIn and find the relevant position. Like there's no standardized way, and that reflects. And that's why what Diana says, we usually go to more specialized or more, friends and family kind of searches. We do global searches, but they're more targeted to specialized listservs. But we've had great success. We now can attract people from industry that want to come back and work for a core, which was unheard of when we started. In the last, and hopefully we have a position, as we said, it's open, so please share it.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what was being discussed earlier about industry taking away like flow personnel and stuff, a lot of those people that go away start missing things about academia, and so we feel like we're kind of in that sweet spot of capturing people back again. And I wanted to say one more thing about the finances. The finances always sound scary. You pay more people bigger salaries, and it seems like, how can we possibly do this? We have found that better compensation, better people, more people are using the core, so our revenue stream keeps going. And so the revenue stream has elevated each year, and so while we have expanded our core staff, our revenue stream has tripled. And so it's been fine. So I think it's worth the risk. It's not really a risk.
And because of this criteria that we have reduced the turnover. So people come, stay at the core, just to hire new people. It's been useful. We have been reached out, and they can negotiate, okay, I have more ladder to grow. Like if I start here, can I get there? Can I get there? Can I get there? And then I have the career ladder path in front of me to tell them that, yes, that's a possibility depending on your performance.
And I'll say from the OHSU end of things, in terms of recruitment where the core directors are getting their candidates, I don't necessarily see that side of it very much because I see the candidates, like I'm helping to post the position, and then I see the candidates as they're coming through and being hired. I do have a lot of core directors who reach out to me and say, I have a candidate and we need to do a direct hire request. Can we get that approved? I see Andrea DeBarber is here, and I've worked with her a ton on some of her hires, and she's been very successful in having that she's had interns, undergraduate interns in her lab, and then she moves them into a core scientist position. So that's been one pipeline. I think for us, I've seen a pattern kind of develop in that some of the core directors want to hire more entry-level staff because they want to train people on the instrumentation in their lab. And then some core directors, depending on their equipment or what it is they're doing, they actually want people with a PhD that already have some training to come in and be ready to go immediately. And so obviously you can see where there's going to be a salary difference there, hiring someone entry-level and you're training them, or someone who has an advanced degree, a terminal degree, and they've already got a little bit of experience. And in HR, that's where we've run into some, a little bit of struggle sometimes in those salary negotiations, where they're used to just kind of popping like, okay, they have a PhD, 1 year of experience, put it in the spreadsheet, and it pops out on the other end, here's what their salary is going to be. And we have to go back and say, no, we're looking at the skills that they have. Or, someone has a bachelor's degree and 2 years of experience, but we're able to say, but no, look at this internship that they had and the skills that they have. It's very unique, and I think we're still trying to we're starting to see them turn a little bit, but we are very much trying to get them to understand we're emphasizing skills. And I think that's what a lot of our core directors, they have people reach out to them when they have an opening that have that skill set. And so I'm there to facilitate hiring someone directly into that role. Although we've had open positions and we have tons of applicants, and the core director has a tough job trying to figure out who it is they're going to appoint to that role.
Can I turn that into ask Ken's question large, right? So that sounds good. Too many candidates that you have to whittle through. Are other people having that, or are you having trouble recruiting and finding people actually for the jobs you're hiring? So if you're having problems, I guess raise your hand. Having challenges. Okay. And then, so Ken's following question was, what are you doing, right? And so the unique things, it sounds like you're just putting the jobs out there and getting a massive amount. It sounds like you're relying on friends and family. Any other unique tactics people are taking to get people to apply to these jobs?
Internal poaching to some degree. Find an RA who's a little dissatisfied in the lab they're in and see if they want to make a career jump.
Building community, it's important, right?
Yeah. It's in the same, also we find vendors of equipment very helpful because they go around and they know people that are looking for a job.
Regarding the parallel career paths of technicians and core facility, besides salary considerations, is there anything about time to promotion? So if someone's in the core for 5 years, even if they have that bachelor's degree, do they get moved up to the next level, and how does that work relative? Like the turnover happens quicker on the tech side, so how does that work on the core side?
I think we depend heavily on the core descriptor matrix. Have they developed the skills to move up? So that leaves them a little bit more flexible. They don't necessarily have to, on the flip side of that, they don't have to wait 5 years, right, to be eligible for a promotion. If they demonstrate the skill sets, then it's appropriate to promote them. On the other hand, if someone's been there for 5 years and really hasn't developed the skill sets, then the core director has that flexibility to say, hey, this is the list of things that you need to do, and this is very important, and you're not quite there yet. Let's put together a plan to get you there. So I think that helps a lot in being able to develop those careers with a little bit of flexibility built into it.
Yeah, we do it just like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're also, one of the things that I'd mentioned in my presentation is that we're currently with HR reviewing those skill sets. And so they were launched in February of '22, and then based on feedback from core directors and based on now we've got 2 years of recruiting data under our belt, maybe some of those skill set specifications, the levels they're set at, maybe they're not quite working the way we wanted them to. So now 2 years in, we're working with HR with feedback from the core directors to tweak that.
2 quick comments and a fast question. I run a flow core out of the Houston area. So the discussion on unionization is actually very interesting because my institution is actually trying to keep unions away, and primarily for the nursing staff. So they've got sweet salaries as a result, but those sweet salaries haven't translated onto the technical side yet. So, and then as far as paucity, yeah, we've got 9 academic flow cores in 3 industries in the Houston area. So the last time I needed to search for somebody, it took me 14 months. And basically I had to take what I could get, so it wasn't an issue of having that. My real question is, stemming back, is where to go as far as human resources. Absolutely no disrespect. I just met you today. I have more respect for you than I do the director of my own human resources. To them, an RA2 is an RA2 is an RA2 is an RA2. And I've got somebody that I've trained over the last 14 months to be very specialized, and they seem to have it in their freaking mindset that any old RA2 can come in and do exactly what she does, when it took her 3.5 months full time to feel comfortable on a sorter. Obviously, this isn't flow specific. This translates into microscopy, X-ray crystallography, you name it. So how do you convince human resources that no, these are specialized positions and they need slightly bumped salaries. Otherwise, I'm going to have this person bought out from under me as my last tech was.
Right. I think it's really good, and let me clarify a little bit. I'm HR, but not HR, I think. So I'm not trained in HR. I don't work for central HR at OHSU. I have HR adjacent experience, which I think makes me it's a kind of a unicorn role, right? So I know enough about HR to be semi-dangerous, but I'm not officially part of them. So I think that for us, it has been a ton of repetition. But we also have had buy-in from the chief executive for research. My boss is the VP for research administration. She's also bought into this, so we have that. I think Andy's done a brilliant job he at one point did some research and figured out how much money, how many grants do core labs touch at OHSU, and it was, you can say the specific number, but that catches people's attention pretty quickly, right? And so if you're able to say that, our core labs touch this many hundreds of millions of dollars of grants at OHSU, and without the core labs, perhaps some of these grants would collapse. They wouldn't even be here, right? So I think that it's important to show that these core labs, it's a really specific skill set. And Andy, I think, he's the expert on this. I've heard him present about it a million times. And it really opened my eyes because at the beginning I thought, well, it's a entry-level lab position, so it's a research assistant. That was my department administrator hat. But then over time, if you work with Andy every day, you will hear. And so over time I was convinced, this is completely different. This is not like, I call it regular research, no disrespect to that, but that's, it is completely different.
One great tool is the uniform guidelines. It spells out what a core is, a shared resource is. And if the uniform guidelines state it, and it's been accepted on a federal level, you can show that to them and say, look, it is a distinct set within the research ecosystem, and therefore it deserves that attention and that distinction from the general research population. Not better or worse, it's just different. They're doing they're developing a different program overall, and so using that, the uniform guidelines, is really helpful.
Right. I was going to say, I found with our own HR that within our institution, genetics and bioinformatics were recognized as special and requiring special skills and unique trajectories, job trajectories. And so I said, yeah, we're like genetics and bioinformatics. And then they kind of started to catch on. So I don't know what the equivalent is at your institution, but there was this broad institution-wide acceptance that those fields required these special skills. And it was like, yeah, we're the same thing. And so that helped. I don't know if it would help you, but.
I'll steal a second to say, too, that education, right? Feelings aside about HR and having to deal with them, they need to learn. And we've already had a conversation about, this organization is a great place for them to learn. Aside from the great work that has been done, we're standing on the shoulders of giants because of the work that's been done. They're still not going to listen. But when they come here and meet some folks, it might be worthwhile. So whether it's the national meeting or if you get access to the regional meeting, I think more of us are talking about how do we make sure HR and those other offices that we have to work with show up so they realize we are unique and they'll learn from firsthand accounts about what's actually, why we're different.
Yeah, I would just implore everyone, let's work together on this. I'm not unionization, not necessarily in my mind, but collaboration and pushing forward together to have a sort of a singular approach will really help us nationally as a group.
With that, we are just at time, and we are going to a quick break before we go to the closing keynote. So before we all head out, I just want to say thank you again. Stay tuned for more conversations. Take care. There's an iPad up here. That's joking.
Stop, Andy.